And we are starting recording now. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to this live stream. My name is Daniel Martin Peixe, and this is gonna be a talk about cinematography applied to VR, especially with Quill, because that's the tool that I use the most. And this is not. I don't want this to be like the rule book or anything like this. There's no rules because at the moment VR storytelling is very new, and we are all, experimenting, exploring new ways to tell stories using this medium, right? Um, but I wanted to talk about the things that influenced me when I did the Remedy, and I love movies, classical cinema, and I think we can take a lot of inspiration from cinema and cinematography, and this is what this talk is about. Is kind of getting inspired and discussing what can we learn from the traditional cinema, right? So let's see if this is working. All right. The first subject I wanted to talk to is the field of view. Uh, the field of view in VR obviously is very big. The audience is able to look around anywhere. There's two kind of ways right now. There's two ways of doing VR storytelling that are popular, which is the 180 degrees field of view and the 360 degrees, right? The 180 degrees allows the experience to be enjoyed by people sitting down, which is great. I think it's probably also much more accessible for other people who, if they have disabilities or whatever, that they have to sit down and put a headset on. 180 degrees, I think, is kind of the this should be the standard in my opinion, but there's also a lot of experiences out there that are 360 degrees field of view, because obviously you get a bigger canvas, you get a bigger playground to tell your story, which is also very exciting as well. But it comes with the disadvantage, that you're forcing the audience to be standing up or sitting in this kind of rotating chair or something like that, right? So for me, I prefer, my favorite is 180 degree. This is what the Remedy is, 180 degree field of view, right? But once I got that out of the way, let's talk about movies and the techniques that they use to tell story, right? The basic technique is the cut. The cut, basically, you have the scene, and then you cut to another camera angle, another room or environment, even you can cut to another time, another reality, or anything. You basically suddenly cut to another thing. So in VR, we can do this. It's perfectly possible to do it. The only thing is you gotta bear in mind where the point of view or point of interest of the audience is, right? In this sketch, I kind of symbolize the point of interest with this, target kind of. So when you cut to another scene, you better make sure that the interesting thing, whatever you want the audience to look at, is going to be in that general area, right? So let me change to Quill for a minute to kind of explain this a little bit more. With I have a little a little guy here who represents the audience. Kind of the audience obviously is free to look anywhere they want. They can do anything, but you as a director, you have to be clever and you have to suggest what's the important thing. And there's other subjects that I could talk about, like composition, color, contrast. What do you do to create a point of interest? I think that's a subject for another talk. But the idea is, if you change and you cut to another thing, make sure it's not too far the point of interest from what it was before. Before it was here, and you cut to this, and like, oh, where is then? Oh, I want to look at this guy now. So you have to really, when you're planning your storyboard, kind of think about where is the audience most probably be interested in. Now, in this case, it's going to be interested in a house, or especially if you work with the lighting and the colors. But boom, if you cut to this, it's gonna be interested in this. So you gotta be careful not to really make it so different than if you put it really far away or something. There's nothing here with the cut. You're gonna force the audience to look around too much. That's not what I wanted to do. Where's the gimbal? It's gone. Okay. The gimbal is gone for some reason.
Do you have a selection on still? Maybe
Oh,
you
there
might
you
have
go.
still
Yeah.
selected.
Anyway, you don't want the audience to get like confused. Like, what am I looking at? When you do a cut. So that's, I guess it's obvious, but I guess I don't know. I thought I would mention it on. It's obvious, but it's very important, I guess, to
It seems
really.
obvious, but it's actually not very something you think of when you're designing. It's something that you can easily do wrong, right?
Exactly.
Like in VR. Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to talk with this little example is when we do camera movement. I'll talk about camera movements later, but it's better to not rotate the view of the audience. So the audience basically they're free to rotate their view. They're gonna be the ones looking around. So we'll talk about that later. But anyway, let's say I cut to another. We're in this shot and somebody's talking and you hear the sound. So the audience will be interested in this because they hear a sound of somebody talking, and that's a trigger. That's what I call a trigger. And you can use anything as a trigger. It could be the sound, it could be an arrow pointing at something, or a character that is pointing in a direction. Anything that you can do to suggest the audience, hey, you have to turn your head now, you have to look here. Why? Because next shot, the interest point is going to be around this area. So you have to be really strategic with these things, and kind of like, oh, here the car is moving, so the audience is going to be following that car, and that allows you to have a different composition. Now you're looking at the different part of the story. So all these things are, yes, you can do cuts, but be really careful to where the audience is looking at. So let's go back to my little presentation here, so I don't go into tangents too much. So cutaway, it's a type of cut. It's a type of effect that you can do, um, and I think it could work really well in VR. So you cut from one scene to another scene. Normally used to show what the character is looking at, and also used to show what the character is thinking. And then you go back to the original. So let's look at these examples here. You get this scene, you cut to what is so impressive, and then you go back, and the camera move is still the same and everything. Here somebody's pointing at the moon, cut to the moon, and then cut away. We cutting away back and forth. We see this weird shot of Mickey, and then back to the werewolf, and then here we see small cuts. I thought this is really interesting. You have really small flashes of what's happening inside his mind, right? And this is something that it could be really powerful in VR. Let's take a look at some of this stuff. I think I did some examples here. So if we look at the first cuts here, you can see here the camera. We cut to the license plate turning, and we cut back to the characters. Let's see this in VR. Obviously, you're not gonna see VR. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know why I did these examples, but you get the idea. Like, I'm in VR, but the cut doesn't bother me because this crosshair represents my center of view, right? And I look at this, and I look at the license plate turning, and cut back to the characters, and it's not really. You would think, oh, it's kind of weird to cut to one scene to another, but it does work actually. You would be surprised, and it helps you tell the story better. So Cutaway, I think is a really cool. Hang on, that's not the one. I'll talk about that later. It's a really cool thing that we could definitely do in VR more. Cut in action. This is the other slide. So keeping the point of interest in the same spot, or roughly in the same spot in the field of view of the audience, you cut to in the middle of an action, and this is really good to show impact of a hit or something, or make something really feel like it's really strong. Also works great for characters that entering a room or crossing a door or something like that. Let's take a look at the examples here. Like cut in action, this boom is awesome. And if you keep the point of view in VR, these kind of cuts, they work really well as well. Oh, somebody has the mic. Somebody has the mic, please.
Yeah, I got it. Sorry about that.
So these are very, this is a classic cinema trick. But my question is always, can this work in VR? Can we do it? And I think it does work really well. And I used it on the Remedy as well. So let's take a look at this. Boom. The punch, right? And in VR it's amazing because you see this fist coming really close to you. You see the three dimensions. But you're focused, because it's so quick, you focus on the action and you're looking at it as if it was a movie. And then boom, you cut to this, you see the depth, you see this guy getting closer to you, and bam, it works really well. I think it really is something that we could use in VR for sure. So
I think what you do so well when you do this stuff is that you actually don't give the audience a chance to look away, right? That's
exactly
another very important thing, right?
Yeah, cut in action is meant for quick actions, things that, like, for example, this is cut in action, right? Cut in action 2 times, bam, and then bam. When the monster starts to fall, that's what I decide to cut, and the next shot, the monster is already in the middle of the action of falling, and that makes the cut seem seamless. Like the purpose of this cut in action is to make it flow seamlessly, and if the point of interest is in the same spot, you're not going to confuse the audience. The audience is going to see it as one seamless action.
I think this was the one shot where you totally fooled me and proved me wrong, because I was like always saying like, oh, cuts are difficult in VR, and then you showed me the scene and I was like, I almost didn't notice it, right? Like it's so clever where you hide the cut and it works so well. And yeah, when you watch it, you barely see it actually. You just feel the action, right? So it's awesome how it works.
If you time it right, that's it. If you have to time it right to make sure that it feels seamless and the audience doesn't even realize that it's a cut, And they do this in the movie.
Do you have one frame of a Peixe glow in there? There, right? One frame in the center.
Yeah, it is. It's like right there, pretty much.
Yeah.
What is it?
There's like one frame of a Peixe glow, I think.
Oh, it's also behind the monster.
The Peixe glow is everywhere, man.
Yeah, there we go.
It's in every single shot. It's in everywhere. I use that thing like excessively in this short. Anyway, jump cut. This is a really cool effect that they do in movies, and like again, this whole presentation is gonna be this question: can we do this in VR? And I think that you can totally, especially when you have the static camera. With the moving camera, maybe not so much, but with the static camera, it's a really stylish way to describe the pass of time, right? Something that could be really long and boring can be made more entertaining with the jump cut. Especially here we have this jump cuts. Basically, this is telling you that they've been doing this for a long time. It's also a stylish way to describe an emotional state of the character, because the skipping time, somebody who's kind of going through some traumatic moment or something, or some sort of thing that makes the time to skip. This works. What I said works great in VR. Yeah, be careful with the point of interest as well, because it could be confusing if you jump cut too much. Match cut. This is also a really cool cinema effect that, why not? We could totally do it in VR. This is a stylish way to cut to another moment in the story, another environment, but it matches the composition, right? It can also imply that the two scenes, they have some sort of connection between them. That's another stylistic thing that the director can do. He can kind of imply by do a match cut. This is a really cool one. So yeah, match cut, I think, is something that's very stylish. It works, and it can work really well in VR as well. And I did something similar in the Remedy. It's a match dissolve instead of a match cut. So I did a match dissolve. The icon of the volcano matches with the actual volcano. So again, if you keep in mind the point of view of the audience, it shouldn't be distracting, shouldn't be confusing. It should be something seamless that works really well. Match dissolve is something I've seen also in Soda Island and other stuff. Invisible cut. This is great. This is cut between when an object covers the whole screen. Gives the impression to seamless transition. It's a great way to change environments in a stylish way. In VR, you have to cover the whole field of view for it to work. All right. To our models, by Goro Fujita uses this very effectively. Effectively, I don't know how to say that. Soul Island also uses this effect. It's really effective thing to do. You basically cover the audience with something, and you cut to another scene, or you made it like a seamless camera move. It seems like it's the same camera move, but you switch to another environment. So this is a really cool trick that comes from the traditional cinematography, right? Iris in and out. This is a very old-fashioned thing, but it can work great. It also can be a really good thing to tell the audience, hey, look at this, or this is important, something that also can work well in VR. In VR, you have to cover the whole view of your audience for this to work. If we try to do this in VR, I think I have an example right here. This is an example of the cutaway. Sorry, it's very silly. She's kind of having a nightmare or something like that. But this is a fade, and here I wanted to describe the iris. So this works really well, but you have to really make sure that everything is covered in black for this to work, right? Am I in the right one? Where am I? Oh, there you go. The way I did this is I did a cube. I covered the audience with this cube, and then here there is a inverse Peixe glow. And I animate this whole geometry. I animated the scale up and down, and it's nice. It's really cool. It kind of gives you this kind of focusing thing into something. I think this is another.
So is that inverse glow just like a large shape, but the middle is like erased?
Yeah, just one
Okay.
click on the erase tool, and that's it.
Gotcha,
Yeah,
okay.
this works really well in cinema, and they use it for this kind of effects, like an old-fashioned thing that makes you focus on this area of the screen. I think we could use it as well in VR for sure. Camera movements. This is the tricky part. Like I said in the beginning, panoramic. In the beginning, I said, don't rotate the whole environment, don't rotate the whole view to create a panoramic, you have to suggest the audience to move their head. The audience is going to be the camera operator, right? So in movies, the camera stays fixed, rotates horizontally from left to right or vice versa. It's a great way to reveal information or show the audience, show the environment to an audience. So these are the examples in traditional movies. So the camera is completely fixed, and what it does is just pivots and rotates to another part of the story, right? But like I said, in VR, we can do this. Let's look at the tilt. The tilt is pretty much the same thing. It's only vertical, right? The camera rotates vertically up and down. And it's awesome to kind of reveal something. If the character looks down, you want to see what they're looking at. So you look down. Again, these things we could do it, but the audience has to do it for us. We don't move the camera for them in these cases when the pivot is fixed. So let's show you an example of that. I think I have it right here. Let's see. Camera moves, panoramic. It should be this way. Is it? Oh, it needs to be. Anyway, here we have Marty McFly. And hang on, let's not view this guy. Again, you have to make sure that at the beginning you have to make sure the audience is kind of looking around the area you want the camera movement to start. And here the shot starts here, and I already set up my audience to look in this way, so they see this character. Oh, I wanna look at him. I want to follow him. And when you follow this character, you reveal this other thing. So I wish you could see this in VR. I don't know how. I don't know if it's worth it to show it like this, but I guess it's worth it if I go behind and I can show you what I did with the camera, right? If we
These are great examples. I'm totally getting a feel for it by seeing the VR.
Yeah, you can see that the camera doesn't move at all, right? Why? Because I want the audience to follow this character. So that's the important thing that I want to keep stressing, you know.
Also, I think important to mention is why is also that it can induce motion sickness, right? Like really bad if you rotate the pivot.
Yeah, I mean,
that's not natural for us to do, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. The motion sickness is something that it changes depending on people. There are people who are more experienced, and people who are less experienced in VR. But if we want to tell a story or do like a narrative, I think we have to try to think about the people who doesn't have experience. So in this way, you get the same feeling of a cinematic panoramic, but in this case, it's all in VR, and it works really really great if you do it like that.
A real life example would be a theater, right? So if you're in a theater and somebody walks to the right, then you will follow it, and there's no camera that shows you, but
exactly.
You will follow naturally.
Exactly. And you as a director, you're planning for the audience to follow this character, and so because you're planning, so you create a new composition here that tells another part of the story, right? And let's look at the next example. It's pretty exciting, this one. Hang on. Oh, no, not this one. Oh, I forgot to put a start. Let's put a start here very quickly. So here we have a Jurassic Park moment, right? The guy is looking down, and the beginning of the shot is right here. So imagine that we are in a different scene and we cut to this shot. So we're already looking at him, and we see him looking down, and we're like, oh, what is he looking at? Oh, wow! And it vibrates. So this works so good in VR because you're feeling it. You're feeling the perspective, the volume, the 3 dimensions. even the reflection, it works so much nicer in VR because you're really in it, right? I wish you could see this in VR, but you're looking at him. He's looking down. Oh my God, what is he looking at? Oh wow! And you can imagine the sound, right? So I made it so quickly. This is just a very stupid little storyboard, but when I experienced this in VR, I was like, wow! I wish I could see the whole Jurassic Park movie in VR. I wish we could have that, but we have to make it. We have to be the future directors. We are doing this, right? So
Let's do it.
let's switch back to the PowerPoint. So tilt, I already showed that. Let's move back to yes. I already explained that. This is already what I said. We must suggest the audience, blah blah blah. I already said that, and this is just an example of the same concept in the remedy, right? You follow this character, you want to see where he's going. Obviously the audience is free to do whatever they want. They're going to look at the house, they're going to look behind, they're going to do whatever they want. But as a director, you have to trust the audience sometimes, and you have to say, okay, maybe they're going to look somewhere else, but I'm going to suggest this is the most interesting thing.
Yeah, and I think that's like a super important point that you're making, right? Because you could make like an elaborate background with birds flying and stuff like that, and then you might distract the audience, or you might make the audience look around. Versus here, you keep everything fairly still, so the audience can't help but look at the coach moving, right? Because that's the one that moves the most, and
exactly.
then you naturally follow it, right?
Yeah, that's one of these kind of what I call triggers. If something moves and nothing else is moving, you're gonna be drawn to it, right? And the opposite is true. If everything is moving and something is not moving, you're gonna be drawn to that. And the same can be said with color, right? If everything is completely muted, desaturated, and suddenly one thing is saturated, you're gonna be drawn to that. So you can use all these triggers and all these things to control where the audience is looking at and kind of orchestrate the audience head movements, right? Anyway, let's move back to track. Track is another camera move that in traditional cinema, the camera is on this track, on these rails, like a train, and it's moving sideways, but it keeps looking forward. It never rotates, right? This is used to show environments while following a character. Works great with foreground elements passing by very close, so it creates a parallax effect. And it's also very useful to reveal new information in the story, right? A couple examples here. This worked really well in traditional cinema. You just move the camera sideways, but you keep looking forward. You see these foreground elements passing by. In 3D, it works much better to have these foreground elements. In traditional movies, you get this 3D effect by just having a huge parallax. In the case of Kubrick, he uses a very wide lens, so the parallax effect is much more pronounced, and you can really feel the 3 dimensions of this room, right? And this is a beautiful shot. I love this shot. This is a track movement on rails, and I love it so much I decided to try to emulate in VR. So let's try to look at it. I think it's the next one. Yeah, we got this. There you go. So this in VR works really well because you have the 3 dimensions right in there. You see these foreground elements passing by, but you keep looking at your protagonist, and it feels really immersive. You really feel what it feels like to be in this room and to enter the room. You don't see this room at the beginning. You're looking at the character, and eventually when he gets into the room, you feel the room. Well, oh wow, and you can really see how big it is. But you keep following the character because that's your interest, and it shouldn't. It should.
It also really makes you feel like you're one of the people in the room.
Yeah,
because you're mixed in with the crowd so well.
Exactly, but you're basically but you're one of the people in the room, but also you're following this character from the side view, And there's a reason why you want to see it from the side. You want to just take a look at the environment, at your freely, but you can always go back to him. So this it's very effective in cinema, and it works really well in VR as well. So let's take a look at. Oh yeah, the next slide is basically a bit more of just make sure the point of view is centered and pretty much in the same spot. I wouldn't change it too much. I wouldn't change the point of view from one to the other while we're doing the track. And the best example of this is also to our models by Goro, because you keep that motion, you keep focusing on the character on the center, and you get more, you get this connection to the character by doing that, right? And you can see the different environments, and so that it's an example that it works really well in VR too. So Dolly is a similar movement, but instead of sideways, it's more forward and backwards. When it's a dolly out, we use it to reveal the information. Oh, somebody has the mic on.
Got it. Sorry.
When it's a dolly in, we use that to make the audience feel like something is really important, so we need to focus. We're getting closer to that thing. It's also used to chase a character through an environment, or also chase a vehicle. Like you get this camera following something, which can be really, really cool. And in VR, it works great because it's, again, you have this, the 3D effect is much more impressive in VR. So let's take a look at the, I think I have the next one. Oh, this is the dolly out. So we start with the character, we're dollying out, we're moving in this environment, and we discover new information. We see all these other characters in there, right? And this creates this very cool dramatic effect to reveal new things, right?
Check out Daniel's zero gravity piece. That one is.
Oh yeah, zero gravity. Yeah,
that's where you do this exactly, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So dolly out, and then we have dolly in. So this is the Jurassic Park scene. We dolly into the dinosaur as we follow a character. We kind of chasing this character first, and then we reveal new information, and we focus on this dinosaur here, and there's a new composition that we establish, right? So we start with one composition, and we finish with a second composition. And Spielberg is a master at doing these things. Spielberg is such a genius. Like, he creates one composition, moves the camera, either dolly or track or Steadicam, and then he ends with a different composition. And he does that multiple times, sometimes in one shot or different shots. And each composition is always really beautiful. Like the way the characters are placed, the layout of the characters. He always finds a really cool way to compose the image. It feels like a painting almost, right? Yeah. If you really look close at Spielberg work, you can see that he really cares about composition. But anyway, dolly in and out can be really used in VR. Very useful. I used it on the Remedy as well. It can be really intense because the camera is moving forward. It can create this feeling of anxiety on the audience, maybe, but sometimes that's good because that's what we want. We want the audience to feel the excitement, the adventure, the danger. In this case, no, in this example here, I'm dollying forward, and these rotations that you see, these are not the camera rotation. This is the audience. The audience is rotating their head back and forth a little bit, but I didn't want to move the character too far away, left or right. I wanted to keep the character more or less centered, even though she's jumping side to side. Keeping the point of interest more or less in the same area is recommended, so we don't create a lot of nausea on the audience. Okay, how am I doing with time? Half an hour. Okay. Pedestal is another camera movement similar to track. It's vertical movement, so it could be used to describe an environment that kind of has a vertical layout, or can be used to follow a character that is moving upwards or downwards. So very used on traditional cinema. As you can see, a lot of directors use this to go from one composition and then move down, so you get a different composition, more interesting, and maybe you can focus on something else. Here we go from a detail to another detail of the face, and here we go from seeing almost nothing to realize that we're looking at this figure, this towering figure of the Darth Vader, right? This one is a very famous shot. It's a pet shot, so that we start with one composition, move upwards, and we get another composition of another character. So really very useful, very cool effect, and definitely can work really well in VR if we keep the point of interest very clear. And this works really awesome in VR because you can feel the scale of this character. You can look up, as well as an audience, you can look up, but in this case, it's better to just stay. And they may do this, and then they're just gonna focus on the face. The face is normally a trigger for the attention of the audience. They normally want to look at the face, especially if it's moving, doing something. But yeah, this kind of work, this kind of movements works as well, really well in VR. So let's move to the next slide. Point of view. Obviously, point of view replicates the feeling of being in the character's skin. Depending on what the character is doing, this can have a combination of different camera moves. So basically, a point of view doesn't mean it's always shaky. Maybe a point of view is somebody who's walking forward, doing like a track or dolly movement. But this is an example of this point of view movies, and in this case, the famous scene from Robocop. This works really well because it makes you feel like, oh, well, what is Robocop feeling at this moment? What is he looking at? How does he feel to be in his skin, to being born again, basically, right? This is a very effective shot, very, very famous. In this point of view shot from Jaws, this is really cool because you're seeing the point of view of the actual shark. So this is obviously something that works really well in VR because you're in it, you're in the character, you feel like you're the character. This is the most used technique in VR storytelling. If you see a lot of storytelling right now in live action and animation in VR, they use this technique a lot. They put you in the shoes of the character, right? Also, sometimes you're a character that's invisible or was kind of a ghost or somebody who's there with the other characters. Similar to VR video games, it gives the audience to be in that character. It can be really nauseating if you're moving the camera too much, if the character is moving too fast or moving. So careful if you're doing that. And this is just another remedy example. I decided to do this for a couple of shots. In this one, I wanted the audience to see what it feels like to have this book in front of you, and you feel like you're the character looking at this book. So yes,
yeah, I think the main difference here is that it can be nauseating, like especially if you shake the camera, and usually in 2D traditional movies you shake the camera to kind of simulate the first person view, versus in VR you let the audience be the first person, right? So you shake the camera shakes because your head is shaking, basically, right?
Yeah.
So you wouldn't animate the shake. That would be definitely pretty nauseating for the audience.
Yeah, I mean, can be used, but my final thing is like, yes, can be used, but careful not to move the point of view too much, the character, the camera too much. Same goes with crane. The crane is a famous technique used in movies, especially now that we have drones technology. It gives the impression of the camera is flying and moves freely in an environment, combining several of the other camera moves. So a crane can contain a dolly, a track, PET all together into one thing. And it's really cool in traditional cinema. And I think we can use it in VR, but I would say be careful, because again, rotating the view is not recommended. So it's better to use the techniques that I described before, like more like a linear movements, and let the audience be the one who rotate, pan, and tilt, right? Be aware of the intensity of the camera move. Make sure that it's not too crazy, but I think can be used. It's just being careful with the point of interest, so it doesn't switch too much, and be careful that the camera moves are not rotating, so the audience is rotating the camera, right? Same goes for Steadicam. In the traditional cinematography, you can get a camera operator to wear the camera, move freely on the environment, and this creates a lot of camera shake. That can give you a feeling of realistic being there and being one of the characters that follows the main characters in the story, right? This can create a feeling of chaos, danger in constant movie. It can work really great for battles of fight scenes and stuff like that. They use it a lot in traditional movies for this kind of shaky cameras, or these kind of cameras where they're following characters throughout a complex environment, right? So in VR we could do this, but can be no shading. So again, I would say do the other ones, the more linear ones, and maybe if you want to have a shake, I would do the shake just for a short period of time, if to make like explosion or something that is a short amount of time. I wouldn't completely shake like this. For example, this I wouldn't do this kind of walking, the bobbing of walking and all that. I wouldn't do that in VR for a long time, because that is where you're gonna get the audience very nauseous. But if you just do dolly, track, pet in a simple way, following characters, and let the audience turn their heads, it can look like a Steadicam, but it's really a combination of all these things that I explained before, right? So yeah, just you can use it. You can get something similar, but be careful with these things. So to end, to finish, I just wanted to say, combine the different techniques, creative. Be creative. You can combine all these things together, like the movie directors do. And in VR also you can combine all these things. Always watch for the point of interest of the audience. Careful with moving too much the VR camera. Give the audience a rest. That's the other thing. Like you don't want the whole experience to be a moving camera, right? You want the audience to take a rest every now and then and then keep some of the some shots not moving. It's very important as well. And I guess to end, let's just watch movies, get inspired, and experiment, because there's a lot that we don't know if it works or not. So, in VR, we always experiment and we always try new things. This is an example of a pet that I didn't show. I forgot. But yeah, this pet movement works really well in VR. It's just so cool because you're focused on the character here. You're looking at that, the camera is moving up, and in 3D you reveal this environment, and you can see all these things that are really far away, and this is closer to you. In VR works really, really awesome. The camera move vertically up, so I recommend using that as well. And I think that's the end of all the examples. And I think that's it. I went through really quickly.
That was good, man.
Speedrun.
Yeah, I
That
like
was really
how comprehensive it is. I mean, you only have 15 minutes left anyway, but yeah, I love how digestible you were able to explain each one. That was like really educational.
Thank you
man.
so much, Daniel. That was really, really useful. I love going over that stuff. I'm also curious, did you learn anything in all your work with camera moves that are unique to VR? Like, can you think of anything that is like you want to do it in VR and it's you would call it a camera move, but it's something that you just can't do in a non-interactive or flat?
The unique thing to VR is something we still haven't. I think I would like to experiment more with because I always thought about you the audience does this and the audience can do this, but what about the depth? What about this, right? I guess we can tell stories as well and use the depth in a creative way. What about we have a, for example, could be fun to have. Hang on, let's just move to another frame where there's nothing. Hang on. There you go. What about, I don't know, this like a window or something, and all of this is opaque, and the right, and then the audience, there's some sort of suggestion that you can look through the window, and here you reveal some new information inside of that, right? I don't know, things like that. I think we can experiment with that. There's a lot of things that I don't know. It's just there's so many things that we could do, but that we haven't really experimented. I mean, I really like what 4 Stories did, because 4 Stories is not. It's not just all I explain in this presentation is, oh, what about the traditional movies and can we do that in VR? But the good thing about 4 Stories is it's not based on traditional movie techniques. It's more about you have several stories, several things happening, and it's really cool what Nick did, because the audience is able to just do whatever they want. They can look at here, but they can also look here. And if you're if you're standing up, you can just move around, and each window, each apartment is going to tell you a different story, and eventually they all connect, which is all really awesome. So I mean, that's great, and this is something that is not it's not directly from the movie, from the traditional movie storytelling. But what I'm passionate about is more that I really like this because I really love traditional movie. So I like this because it gives you this feeling that you're watching a traditional movie, but at the same time it's so much more immersive and interactive because you're the one making those panoramics and everything, right? So, but yeah, there's more ways, obviously, in VR to tell stories that
I thought in
haven't
Remedy
covered. I haven't covered in this presentation yet.
I thought in Remedy you did some really unique things as well. I'm trying to remember what it struck me as VR unique, but it seemed to be a lot of the vignetting.
Yeah, I was inspired by comic books, though.
I think what you did really well in the Remedy, Daniel, was also making the audience think that you looked around, but you actually changed the camera angles for the audience. So, for example, the action sequence, you see it from the back, you see it from the front, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And when I think back, I feel like I looked left and right, although in reality I was just looking forward, right? But by tricking the audience like that with the cuts, it really makes you remember things that you actually didn't do, so that's really
cool. Like the shot of the arrow, for example. I have this thing here, and it's around this area. It's not really in the center of the audience view, right? And then the next shot is something like that. I think it's here. The monster is getting shot, I think, somewhere like that. He has the arrow somewhere like that. So they're like here, but in the middle, what I did is I added one extra thing. I added this thing, like a motion blur thing, and the arrow is completely it's right in the middle. It's very fast, But what this allowed me to do is suggest the audience to slightly turn their heads, because here we're starting like, hang on, wait, okay, so here we're starting like that, right? And we're looking at her. The next shot is the arrow, so I'm suggesting the audience to slightly move a little bit to the center, and boom, here we see the impact of the arrow in the monster. So yeah, I use that middle shot to kind of suggest a little bit of a head turn. So what Gordo says is like, this made you feel like you're doing this.
Exactly.
Because you see this motion blur, and there's an example of on the panoramic movements in the traditional movies. There's this panoramics that are very quick. They have a name. I forgot the name now. There's a specific name, like a quick pans, quick panoramics. So this little thing it makes you feel like you're doing that, but you're not really. You're just turning very subtle. You're doing this, and this. But yeah, because of the motion blur, it makes you feel like you made a very quick, very wide rotation.
Another shot in the Remedy that really worked well for me is like where you look down at him falling into the lava pit, and then you look up at her face. But you only tilt your head a little bit, right? But it feels like you're actually looking down, which works really well as well.
Right.
Yeah, I had doubts with that because I didn't know if it was gonna work, because the audience is not really looking down, but I guess I did the bad guy. I think I did it slightly lower than the audience, slightly lower than the audience point of view. So he's like that, somewhere like this. So the audience is kind of like, oh, I'm gonna look down a little bit. So it makes you feel like you're looking really down a little bit, because the perspective gives you the impression, and and that's something that you can play with as well. You can play with the perspective, and like, here is the ground, but it's not really the ground. The ground is here where the grid is, right? But you can kind of tilt it sometimes and make the audience feel like they're looking more down than they really are.
Because
so
physically looking down or physically looking up, like completely, is actually very uncomfortable, right? So like,
yeah,
you
exactly.
do that. So this helps tremendously. Omari actually has a good point here in the chat. He says, like, I think a very important part that you didn't mention is also scale of the scene comparison to wide shots or close-ups.
Oh yeah.
Like, live scale, you're closer to emotions, and when the scale is very small, you look more into what's going on, the state, the environment where the character is. I think that's definitely like a hugely important thing in VR, right? The perception of emotions, and like a bird's eye view where it's more like an establishing shot, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I didn't cover it because I feel like that comes with more with the composition of the image and what lens are you going to use. In the case of VR, it's not the lens, it's the scale of your viewpoint. But it acts as the lens in traditional cinema. Like in traditional cinema, they use a very short lens to have this kind of wide vistas, like you can really see a lot of coverage with a wide lens, and they use the short lens. I mean the bigger lens to really close up into a face of a character, and the equivalent in VR is when you scale down the viewpoint so you feel at the same level as the character and you really get more intimate. And then you can, if you make the viewpoint bigger, so the environment looks really small, the audience feels like you're looking at this wide environment, and everything looks a bit like a miniature, but allows you to have more of a wider view. And also the 3D effect as well is affected by this. I didn't talk about that either. The 3D effect is more pronounced if you make the camera smaller, right? Bigger. If you make the camera bigger, if you have an environment, the parallax effect is going to be bigger. It's gonna give you more stereo effect, which is something you can play with as a director as well. You can decide how much stereo you want, because if you make the camera really small and you put it in front of this, what the audience is gonna see is gonna be pretty flat, like almost no 3D effect, because you're so small. It looks like a gigantic face in front of you. It's so far away that you don't have this perception of depth. So yeah, that's something I should have covered a little bit more. But yeah,
and also I think the unique part for VR with the scale is, like for example, when I did Beyond the Fence, I had where the robot fails to fly and he's like sad. I had
Yeah.
that in a miniature version first, and for some reason I could not feel his emotion, right? So I decided to make him life scale. So I'm like with him on the ground, and all of a sudden you're in the environment, you can feel his emotions, and that's, I think, something you can't really achieve in 2D in the same way. And scale and height is also like a super powerful thing in VR, and that's unique to VR, right? For example, your lunch break thing piece, Danielle, or my skyscraper piece, where you can really feel like, oh, I could actually fall off this ledge, and that feeling is something it's impossible to convey in 2D, and I think that is like a very unique to VR.
Well, it's in 2D, in traditional movies, they use, like I said, like a wide lens to give you this feeling of, oh, something is really far or something is really height. But yeah, in VR, it's much more powerful. It's
you can never make the audience feel that you're falling. You might fall, like that real fear. You can't get this through a 2D screen, right?
In VR, you get into different senses. Like we have the vision, we have the ear. In VR, you get into like a deeper, like the lizard brain kind of thing, where
definitely,
yeah, exactly. I think in VR triggers that, because
there's cognitive.
Exactly. When you feel like you're falling, there's this feeling of, oh my god, I'm in danger. My body's in danger. What's happening here? It feels so real that triggers that part of your brain, right? And it's something that we as directors we can use that the same way the traditional movie directors, they use the visuals, they use the colors, they use the composition to do subtle things that the audience doesn't really know, but they feel. You know what I mean? It's these kind of things that we can play with as VR directors, right?
It's super powerful. Yeah, the real fear, right? You can induce real fear or real emotion. Much. It's much more visceral for sure in VR.
Yeah.
The one other thing, Daniel, that you said a lot, which was interesting, and I think you do it really well in Remedy. Goro does it really well in Over the Fence. But the idea that you're leading, you said the audience is moving their head, and that's what's interesting about VR is we are in control of the camera gimbal.
Yes.
And so you are the director, but so you have to be smart about leading me to move my head the way you want me to move my head, and that's what's really great.
Yeah,
that's actually a good point. I would like to add to that. I feel like in VR it's so important to guide the user, right? Like it's really important to help the audience as much as possible to follow the story. And I covered that in my VR storytelling class that I did here in Discord. But one thing that is like tremendously helpful and can actually remove a lot of fear of missing out is also like using narration, right? Narration is one thing that might not be as important for 2D, where you maybe use it as a monologue or as an intro or something like that, but the images speak for themselves. Versus in VR, it could be a very, very helpful element to guide the user. And that's what I did in Beyond the Fence, for example, where even if you're not looking at the robot sorting junk, the narration will tell you that, so you can still take in the environment. And then if you discover the robot at the end of that first scene, you will still know what happened, right? So that it's like a safety net, and also makes it more digestible. So if you have
100%.
if you have an immersive set where you want the audience to look around, then it's good to have remove a little bit more cognitive load by giving more guidance by using stuff like typography in the scene or narration, right? So those are
Yeah.
really cool elements to use.
Yeah, and also we have positional audio in VR, which is a device that we could use as well to get the attention of the audience. Like you hear a noise or somebody talking on your left side, and you want to turn and you want to, things like that also can trigger the audience point of view, right? Yeah, like
Totally.
it's all this thing. Text I use obviously in the Remedy. I use text because I made it look like a comic book. So the text is the ultimate trigger. Is the
And the
ultimate thing that,
bubbles.
and the speech bubbles are taking the audience, and they're thanks to them. I make them look at exactly the direction I want them to look at. So yeah, it's this. I call that, I think, triggers, because that's what they are. They kind of trigger the audience to look in a specific direction, and whatever technique that you want to use to that, anything works. It's either audio or the text or narration or what I said before, like the composition of the image, the colors, the contrast. You can use movement. You can use all these things to trigger where you want the audience to look.
And I feel like, the more you have that, the more comfortable is it to consume, versus like in 2D, it could be annoying if somebody over communicates, right? So that's like very interesting, where in VR it feels good when you're guided. In 2D,
Exactly.
you want to discover things on your own, so you don't want it to be overly guided, right? So it's interesting.
And the other thing I would say is, do not put several points of interest. Because that's where you're starting to lose control to where is the audience looking at. Because in VR, the audience is free to look anywhere. So I would suggest, when you compose your image, when you compose your picture, you're designing a scene, you really have to be very conscious. Okay, where are they going to look at? Does this have a lot of detail or not? Because if it does have a detail, they're gonna try to look at the detail. But if you keep the detail more or less in this area, maybe more shadows, more contrast, something more interesting here, you're guiding in a subtle way the audience. Oh no, this is the way I should look, not here, not here, here. And yeah, detail is also important to bear in mind. Do not saturate everything with detail, unless you have a scene where there's no camera movement and you really want the audience to settle and stay there for a while, and look at all the detail, if that's what you need. But if you need the audience to specifically look here because you're gonna do a move, then yeah, just be super conscious.
Yes, those are great points.
Yeah, it depends on the scene. Yeah, it depends on the scene.
If it's like absolutely important and like you 100% want to make sure that people look, then you go the vignette route, right? Where you really only show what's necessary, and what you did in Remedy quite a bit, where you don't even give the audience chance to look away.
Exactly. Sometimes you just wanna, like, okay, this is what I want you to look at, and this is something important here. Look at here, and then nothing on the background, absolutely nothing. Maybe a Peixe glow. That's it. but yeah, I think it's really exciting. Yeah, I think it's really exciting because you can get super creative with all these tools that I talked about today, plus all the VR specific things. You can get really creative and just combine all these things, and basically you're orchestrating and you're making the audience doing all these orchestrated head movements. They don't even realize that they're doing it. And you can take them to different worlds, different atmospheres, different places. And one of the things I don't enjoy is in some VR experiences that I've seen, is like you feel like you're always in the same place. And I'm like, I wish I could just move or travel to another spot, or see the same action from closer, or something. That's something that. Hang on, I'm just realizing something. Is this?
Don't say you didn't record.
That's happened once to me.
Oh, no, it's working. Sorry.
Okay. We're at
All right.
5.
Okay, this is the perfect time to end the recording. I'm gonna stop the recording, and this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you loved it. Like and comment.
Thanks, Daniel. That was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Like,
Yeah, super
comment,
cool.
subscribe.
Bye bye. Like
Amazing.
and subscribe.
Hit that bell.